The Gatecrasher by Chris Harvey. Part 1. The bogeyman'll get you, the bogeyman'll get you. Mandy Barnes slammed the door in the kids' faces. She had neither the time nor the patience to humour them tonight. She let out a long sigh and looked at her watch. 8:38 p.m. The party was due to begin at 10, and she hadn't even started on her makeup yet, although she was kitted out in her fancy dress costume. Apart from that, everything else was ready, more or less. The food and drink was prepared, the decorations had been hung, and the pumpkins put in their positions. The music was playing and the lights were dimmed. Now she just had to get her makeup done. Mandy sucked in a breath, turned away from the cottage's front door, and made her way back up the stairs to her bedroom. The figure pulled the mask down over its face with a gloved hand. The features etched into the plastic were twisted, ugly. Leaning across the passenger seat, the figure opened the glove compartment and reached inside, closing its fingers around the object that it found there. The large bladed kitchen knife glinted as the wickedly sharp blade caught the moonlight, and although hidden behind the mask, the figure smiled to itself as it twisted the knife, admiring the play of light on steel. Moments later, the driver's door opened and the figure swung out its legs, dirt crunching beneath its shoes as it pushed itself out of the car. Though darkness had fallen, visibility was fine because the moon was full, most appropriate for the night in question. Closing the car door, the figure gazed across the field from its position at the gateway, its focus of interest on a small cottage just visible through the trees at the far edge. Lights burned inside the windows, but at the moment no signs of life could be seen within. It all looked very cozy. On its way driving here, the figure had passed many children, all kitted out in fancy dress for a night of trick-or-treating. There had been many witches, black cats, skeletons and ghouls. And pumpkins, of course, their triangular eyes and toothy grins a glowing amber against the night. But it was quiet here. The cottage was out in the wilds, away from it all, surrounded by woodland and trees. The nearest road was more than half a mile away. Maybe kids had been here earlier, dared by each other to venture this far, tonight of all nights, but now they were long gone. The figure stepped forward, moving away from the car and towards the lighted windows of the cottage, attracted to them like the proverbial moth to a flame. It would be there in a couple of minutes. Mandy finished applying the black grease paint to her lips and pouted into the mirror. She laughed, acknowledging how appropriately weird and wonderful she looked. She had no idea what she was meant to be, but had certainly had fun with all the theatrical makeup that she had bought especially. Still chuckling to herself, she snatched a glance at her watch and caught her breath when she saw the time, 10:27. She had been in front of the mirror for almost 3 hours. She frowned. Someone should have arrived by now. For a fleeting moment it crossed her mind that no one would come, but then she quickly rejected the thought. Of course they'd come. Who could say no to a Halloween party? She leaned closer to the mirror to give her work of art face a closer inspection, just to make sure everything was perfect. And she liked what she saw. It certainly wasn't Mandy Barnes, but it was great for a Halloween party character, and it made her look 10 years younger than her actual 28 years somehow. She smiled, and her green eyes seemed to shine like emeralds. She moved even closer and examined the black lips that made her teeth seem extra white and perfect. She examined the beauty spot on her cheek, actually a tiny black cat that she'd painstakingly drawn with a freshly sharpened eyeliner pencil. A nice finishing touch, she thought. It was the knocking that suddenly wiped the smile from her face. Panic had hold of her again and she leapt up from the chair and made for the bedroom door. In the process, her boot caught the leg of the dressing table, causing the makeup to topple over. Some of it rolled off the table and fell to the carpet, but she didn't even think about turning to pick it up. She flicked off the light and started down the stairs, taking 2 and 3 at a time, suddenly realizing that the music had stopped playing on the hi-fi. She cursed under her breath. It would have to be playing before she let anyone in. She jumped the bottom 4 steps. The small living room was decorated with various Halloween novelties. Bats, spiders, skulls hanging by a few straggles of hair, and, of course, pumpkins. There were 3, 2 on either side of the mantelpiece, and another larger one perched on top of the TV. A real log fire glowed in the grate, adding an overall warm and cosy atmosphere to the room. Mandy reached the hi-fi and jabbed the play button on the CD player. 5 more knocks rapped upon the back door. The music began, an upbeat disco rhythm. It filtered from the speakers at a comfortable level. The lights were dimmed in the kitchen like all the other rooms, bathing the room with an effective amber warmth. There was a long table running the length of one wall, upon which was an impressive spread of foods and snacks, sandwiches, pies, trifles and cakes. The air was thick with their appetizing odour. Mandy moved to the back door, trying her utmost to control her breathing before she opened it, praying that the guest wouldn't be angry with her for keeping them waiting. She turned the key in the lock and closed her hand around the handle. She swallowed, fixed a smile upon her face, and twisted the handle. She pulled open the door and stopped smiling. There was no one there. Mandy stared out into the infinite blackness, the biting cold already nipping at her flesh like 1,000 wicked needle points. "Hello?" The single word seemed to be sucked in by the darkness. There was no reply, only complete and utter silence. And then she smiled, and without a second thought stepped out into the cold October night. It was Halloween, of course, and this was someone's idea of a laugh. They'd knocked on the door and then hidden somewhere. Her eyes were beginning to grow accustomed to the night, and she realized that it wasn't as dark as it had first seemed. She looked up and saw that the moon was full, and it sent a tingle up her spine. It made the night seem even more special. She scanned around, seeing the many trees that surrounded the cottage quite clearly now. She noticed also the whispering of the chilled breeze as it filtered through the trees, and could make out, for quite some distance, the fields, tens of acres all around her. She quickly spun around, hearing a noise behind her. The wide-open kitchen door seemed a long way away. She hadn't realized that she'd moved so far out into the night. The glow from the doorway looked like the daylight at the end of a tunnel, the way out tempting her towards it and to safety. But what was going on? She flicked her eyes to the coal bunker. Someone could be hiding behind it. It was certainly big enough. "Okay, come on, joke's over. You've made your point." She couldn't hide the uneasy tremor in her voice. "Come on, it's freezing out here." Still no sound or movement. "Look, do you want to stay out here all night and freeze to death?" Silence. "The party's not out here, you know. It's inside." She decided to try sarcasm. "Well, that's where the food and booze is usually kept anyway." Still silence. She was beginning to lose her patience. She'd had enough of the game, and it crossed her mind that it might have been the kids again, trick-or-treating. She sighed and decided to make her way back to the kitchen. It seemed to take her forever to get there, but she eventually reached the step and lifted her foot onto it. It was then that the gloved hand grabbed hold of her shoulder from behind, the grip strong and secure. "Don't scream, or I'll kill you." The voice was gruff and seemed muffled somehow. Mandy froze. She couldn't scream even if she'd wanted to. Fear gripped her in its vice-tight grip, just like the hand on her shoulder. The thought of jokes, fun and games had now evacuated her mind, and she was totally convinced that this was all very real. "Right, good girl. That same muffled voice. "Now, I want you to turn slowly around and face me, and don't try anything silly. I've got a knife." "Please," she faltered, too terrified to speak. "I won't hurt you if you do exactly as I tell you. If you don't scream and do as you're told, everything will be fine." It lifted up its other gloved hand, revealing a large and wickedly sharp kitchen knife in its grasp. "Now just turn around and face me like a good girl." Mandy knew she must do as she was told. She couldn't possibly object. One wrong move and that would be it. She would probably be dead or worse, tortured and abused, even raped. Trying her utmost to control her trembling, she slowly began to turn around. It was the glint of the knife's blade that first caught her eye. She flinched but continued turning. The face was horrible. Mandy caught her breath, which thankfully stopped her from screaming. And then she realized that she wasn't looking at a real face at all, but at a mask, a plastic face mask, some kind of witch, she presumed, an ugly witch with a wart on the end of its nose and disgusting yellow teeth and a hooked chin. But she also saw that real eyes glinted within the small circular eye holes. "I only want to say something to you, Mandy." It knew her name. Mandy was beginning to feel faint and sick. She prayed that she would pass out before she felt any pain. The masked figure lowered the knife slightly and cocked its head to one side. Then it reached up and took hold of the mask, and in one quick movement ripped it off its face.